in Mago Reddit. Today's story is...
My family asked me to postpone my wedding for 10 years because my 30-year-old brother would be depressed to see me marry before him. What I did next broke all the rules. I am 26 and have been with my now husband Elliot, who is 28, for 6 years. We got engaged 2 years ago and finally had our wedding last weekend. However, the whole situation was surrounded by family drama that turned what should have been a happy day into something much more complicated. I fully understand that weddings tend to generate family tensions, but it is one thing to have small disagreements about the floral arrangements or the table layout, and quite another to have to face what I had to face with my brother, the favorite son of the family. To give you a better understanding, I am the younger of 2 brothers. Tom, my 30-year-old brother, has always been considered the family pride. And he had reason to be. He was a star athlete in high school, he got into a prestigious university on a partial scholarship, and everyone in the family always believed he would have a bright future. The problem began after his university graduation 8 years ago. Since then, he has been discovering himself and exploring possibilities. He has had approximately 6 different jobs, none of which lasted more than a year. He has moved back in with my parents on 3 separate occasions, and he constantly talks about big plans that never seem to materialize. He is always promoting some new business project, a brilliant business idea, a radical career change, or some additional university degree, but so far, none of these initiatives has come to fruition. In contrast, my story is quite different. I attended a state university, obtained my degree in accounting, got a good job at a major firm immediately after graduating, and have been steadily and progressively building my career. I met Elliot during my last year of college, when he was starting his master's degree. After 2 years together, we decided to move in together, and after 4 years of relationship, we got engaged. Everything seemed to be going perfectly well in our lives until we started making preparations for our wedding. That's when the situation took a completely unexpected turn. My parents called me in for a meeting to tell me something that left me stunned. They sat me down and, in all seriousness, told me that I needed to postpone my wedding plans for a period of 8 to 10 years because Tom was still trying to find his way in life. No, you didn't misread. They weren't talking about a few months' wait, but years. According to them, Tom had something important on the horizon, but when I asked for more details, their answers were incredibly vague. It seemed that not even they knew exactly what it was, something related to a possible business, or perhaps going back to university to study for an MBA. But nothing concrete. What they were clear about was their concern about how it would look socially for the younger sister to get married before the older brother, and they were especially worried about the effect this could have on Tom's already fragile self-esteem. They thought that if the family continued to move forward while he remained stagnant, it could affect him deeply. I confess that at first I laughed because the request seemed absolutely absurd to me, but they remained serious and asked me to stop laughing because they were completely serious. They explained to me that Tom's life had been going downhill since he finished high school because although he had graduated from college, things had not turned out as they had expected. He hadn't managed to continue his sporting success at university, nor had he got that spectacular job that everyone anticipated after graduation. I explained to them as patiently as I could that Tom is already 30 years old and that I couldn't just put my life on hold for him. If I had managed to live all these years in the shadow of his initial successes without it affecting me emotionally, I didn't see why he couldn't do the same now. What's more, we had been preparing for the wedding for months. We had saved up, started looking for venues, and were considering dates for the following spring. But instead of showing understanding, my parents stood firm in their position, insisting that I should be patient to prevent Tom from falling into a deep depression. I replied clearly that Elliot and I had been building our relationship for 6 years, and that our wedding was a celebration of that commitment, not an event related to Tom's personal problems. We couldn't and wouldn't wait another 8 or 10 years. We had plans to start a family after we got married, and we weren't going to postpone our lives for my brother. At that point, my mother resorted to reminding me how they had helped to finance my university studies, trying to awaken a feeling of guilt so that I would accept their far-fetched proposal. It is true that they supported me during university, and I am genuinely grateful for that, but since graduation I have been completely financially independent, and I have never asked them for financial help. When I told Elliot about this conversation, he was absolutely furious. He has always had a good relationship with my family, but this went beyond any reasonable limit. He pointed out how absurd it was to stop our lives just to protect Tom's feelings, arguing that in 10 years' time my brother's situation could be exactly the same, or even worse. And then what would they do? Ask us to wait another 10 years? So Elliot and I made a firm decision. We would go ahead with our wedding, regardless of who agreed and who could attend. We began to organize everything discreetly, not because we wanted to hide it, but because we anticipated that if my parents found out, they would continue with their pressure campaign. We invited only our closest friends, Elliot's family, who did not impose any conditions and were simply happy for us, and my best friend from university as a bridesmaid. However, we didn't intend to keep it a permanent secret, as we knew that sooner or later the truth would come out. And when it did, the situation became chaotic. My phone was flooded with messages from my family. My parents were completely outraged. My mother wrote to me to tell me how my selfish act was going to destroy Tom's life. I still find it hard to understand how my getting married could have such a devastating impact on my brother. As expected, Tom assumed the role of victim that he knows so well, complaining that I hadn't invited him. I didn't because I knew I would have to inform my parents. And from my perspective, he also did nothing to stop this madness on their part. When we spoke to him after everything had exploded, to find out if he shared my parents' opinion, he didn't confirm it directly, but he wasn't willing to talk to them either to put an end to this absurd situation. In a way, he seemed pleased with the idea that my parents could get away with it. At the end of the day, I remain convinced that Elliot and I made the right decision. Our wedding was for us. We are not responsible for Tom's problems or the way my parents have overprotected him. Elliot's family has been very clear in expressing that my parents are acting irrationally. My friends also share this opinion and affirm that there is nothing wrong with what we did. When we decided to go ahead with the wedding without my parents, I was aware that this would affect our relationship in the long term. But their request was completely out of line. They weren't asking me to do something reasonable, like adapting the menu to accommodate Tom's dietary restrictions. They expected me to put my life on hold because, at 30 years of age, my brother still hasn't decided what he wants to do with his life. What he should be doing is the same as what we all do: work and sometimes do things we don't love in order to build a better future. But no, he prefers to sit around waiting for life to reward him just because he's the family's favorite. Update 1. Yesterday, I received a call from my mother telling me that she had to find a way to fix the situation. She asked me if I had reconsidered my position and if I was ready to reconcile with the family. The only problem is that I have nothing to resolve because I have done nothing wrong. I got married, and if anyone has a hard time accepting that, they should seek professional help. I replied that if they wanted to reconcile with me, they were welcome to do so, but that I wasn't going to apologize if that was what they expected. It is not my responsibility to take care of Tom's problems, or of what they think I have done to him, or of their feeling offended. It was then that my mother began to cry. Perhaps she had been crying before, but it was then that I noticed that her voice was breaking with tears. She told me that Tom was facing depression, and that I was making his condition worse. Depression is not something to be taken lightly, and I have seen friends go through it, so I can understand how difficult it must be for him. However, I explained that what they had asked me to do would not solve his problem, and that his request was completely irrational. The world is not going to stop because Tom feels bad. That is neither realistic nor healthy. If tomorrow there is a news item in the newspaper that Tom doesn't like, are they going to call the editor to stop it from being published or to stop the event from happening? If Tom gets depressed because a volcano erupts, will they run to try to cover it with their hands? I told them that I am willing to support Tom in appropriate and constructive ways, but that it is time for them to get back to reality and think carefully about the situation. At that moment, they fell silent. Then, abruptly, they hung up on me. Shortly afterwards, I received a text message from my father saying that the comments I made during the conversation with my mother were inappropriate and that, at the very least, I owed her an apology and, of course, Tom as well. Elliot, for his part, was furious when he read the message. He suggested that we not respond, as we would only aggravate the situation. He's right, but it's really frustrating when people distort reality to justify their own actions. And just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more complicated, my aunt, my mother's sister, contacted me privately. She is one of the most level-headed people in the family and doesn't seem to have inherited the same tendency towards irrationality as my mother. With her, I feel I can talk about issues that I can't always discuss with my parents. She told me that she has been following the whole situation and wanted to provide me with some context about what is really going on. According to her, what my parents mentioned about Tom is not related to a business or an academic degree. It is a marriage proposal. Apparently, Tom is planning to ask his girlfriend of 3 months, Ivory, to marry him. My parents are fully aware of his plan and believe that this could be the turning point that changes the course of his life. They are convinced that getting married will provide him with the stability and motivation he needs to get his life in order. But here comes the most surprising part. Ivory has no idea about these plans. Absolutely none. In fact, my aunt told me that Ivory has been confiding serious doubts she has about the relationship. Apparently, she is considering breaking up with Tom because she is concerned about his lack of direction and his tendency to make big promises without keeping them. My aunt even tried to discreetly warn my parents that pressuring Tom to propose might not be the best strategy, especially considering his depressive state. She told them that there was a possibility that Ivory would reject the proposal, especially if she was already experiencing these feelings. But as expected, my parents dismissed these warnings, convinced that a marriage proposal would solve all their problems. I feel great compassion for Ivory. She has only been with Tom for a few months, and she is already questioning whether the relationship is right for her. The idea that my parents are pressuring Tom to propose will probably make the situation worse. Marriage is not a magic solution to personal problems, and I doubt that Ivory will respond as they expect. I don't know her very well, but putting myself in her place, if after only 3 months of dating, especially with someone I'm considering breaking up with, I were to be surprised with a marriage proposal, it definitely wouldn't be a good idea. Furthermore, it is clear that my parents' obsession with Tom's success is distorting their perspective. They are so desperate to see him succeed that they cling to any hope, no matter how unrealistic or potentially harmful it may be. Elliot and I have been discussing how to proceed. He suggested we take a short break from my family to allow the tensions to subside, which seems like a sensible proposal to me. I have temporarily silenced their messages and avoided checking social media for a while, as the constant bombardment of guilt and criticism is exhausting. My aunt thinks I should stand firm in my position, but try to keep the lines of communication open in case my parents eventually come around. I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I don't want to completely cut off family ties, but on the other hand, I'm tired of them treating my life as if it were secondary to Tom's. One positive aspect in all this situation has been Elliot's family. His mother even invited us to dinner last night, and it was the most pleasant evening we have had in a long time, without drama or conflict, just enjoying dinner among adults. It reminded me of what a family should really be like, a refuge from everyday problems, not an additional source of stress. As for Tom, I'm not sure what to do. Part of me wants to contact him to find out how he is, especially after learning about his depression. But another part wonders if that would only reinforce the dynamic in which I am always the one who has to give in while he continues to receive preferential treatment. I don't want to encourage his dependent behavior, but I also don't want to turn my back on him if he really needs help. It's a delicate balance that I'm still trying to find. For now, I'm concentrating on Elliot and our new life together. We're planning a little weekend getaway to relax and celebrate our marriage without complications. I think you can all understand how much we need this break. I greatly appreciate all the support I have received during this period. This is exactly what I expected to find when I decided to share my story, and it is what I have received. I plan to provide more information as the situation evolves. Update 2. Ivory, Tom's girlfriend, contacted me via Instagram a few days ago. She started by congratulating me on my wedding, and then told me that she needed to talk to someone about Tom, preferably someone more rational than my parents. I didn't know exactly how to respond. After all, Ivory and I barely know each other, having only seen each other on a few occasions, and we definitely don't have a close relationship. However, she seemed genuinely distressed, so I decided to listen to her. We agreed to meet for coffee. When we finally met, Ivory confirmed what my aunt had already told me and added some new details. Firstly, she confirmed that she is indeed planning to end her relationship with Tom. The main reason is her deep concern about the complete lack of direction in my brother's life. According to her, Tom is not committed to any career, he does not take on responsibilities, and it has reached a point where she feels more like his carer than his partner. She confessed to me that she is emotionally exhausted. What really struck me was hearing how Tom doesn't seem to realize that there is a problem. Ivory explained to me that every time she tries to have a serious conversation with him about his future, he simply avoids the subject or changes the subject. She even accuses him of not supporting her, when in reality she has been trying her best to help him, but she is now exhausted from being in a relationship where she has to invest so much effort while he contributes nothing at all. Ivory has her life perfectly structured. She is a successful professional and clearly has well-defined goals. But as she told me, Tom doesn't seem to value or respect that in the least. She told me about a time when she offered to help him update his resume and prepare for a job interview. Instead of thanking her for her initiative, he laughed and told her that he didn't need help because he was waiting for something better. The obvious question is, better than what exactly? On another occasion, she suggested he take a course to develop skills relevant to a job he said he wanted, but again, he dismissed the suggestion, arguing that it was a waste of time and that he would figure it out for himself. According to Ivory, it is as if he does not see her as a life partner or even as someone who can provide support, but simply as a person who is there to satisfy his every whim. However, what really made me sad was when Ivory started talking about my parents. Apparently, she has been putting constant pressure on them. They have been telling her that she could help Tom reach his potential, and they have promised to support them financially while my brother reorganizes his life. My mother even told Ivory that she is good for Tom because she represents a positive example for him. It is as if they see her as an instrument to correct Tom, not as a person with her own feelings and limits. Ivory confessed to me that this pressure from my parents is one of the main reasons why she wants to end the relationship. They don't seem to be interested in her as an individual, but only in how she can positively influence Tom and in what way she can help him. If Ivory were as unstable as Tom but he loved her, I'm sure they would be doing everything they could to make him end the relationship right now. But there was still more that Ivory wanted to share with me, as she thought I might understand her better, considering my current conflicts with my parents and my brother. She revealed that my parents have been paying off her credit card debts and giving her money regularly for so-called networking events. But do they know what these events really are? Simple nights out drinking with their friends. And that's not all. Ivory told me that my parents have promised to help Tom start a business using their retirement savings. They are waiting for him to find the right opportunity, but we all know that that is simply a euphemism for saying that Tom is still doing nothing productive, while they continue to finance his life of self-discovery. Not even the great inventors in history have taken so long to discover something significant. I already knew they were overprotecting him, so it doesn't surprise me, but the scale of their intervention is more extreme than I had imagined. I felt immense compassion for Ivory. She has clearly been doing her best to keep the relationship afloat because, in some way, she has feelings for Tom, but even she has reached her limit. She is an incredibly kind and intelligent woman who deserves much more than this. She needs a partner who supports and values her, not a project she has to constantly repair. And not to mention having my parents as in-laws, that would be even worse. Before we said goodbye, Ivory sincerely thanked me for listening to her. She told me that it had done her good to finally be able to express everything she had been keeping inside, and I could see that she really meant it. I assured her that I am available if she ever needs to talk again, and I meant it. Regardless of what happens between her and Tom, she deserves support and understanding. After our conversation, I felt that I couldn't just keep everything she had told me to myself. I decided that I had to tell my parents, so I wrote them a detailed email. I set out everything that Ivory had shared with me, including the constant pressure that they have been putting on him and how this has been negatively affecting his relationship with Tom. Because their intervention is not producing the results they are hoping for, but quite the opposite. I tried to make it clear that their behavior is not benefiting anyone, not Ivory, not Tom, not themselves. I pointed out how their actions are preventing Tom from maturing and taking responsibility for his own life. To be constructive, I suggested that Tom and they consider starting family therapy as a way of jointly addressing these problems. I even attached some informative resources I found on overprotective behavior and healthy family dynamics. So far, I have not received any response from them. I'm not surprised. They are probably upset or perhaps not ready to respond yet. I hope they at least read the email and take some time to reflect on what I have said. Even if they don't agree with me immediately, perhaps my words will plant a seed of doubt that will eventually bear fruit. As for Tom, I hope he finds his way someday, because the tools to do so are available. But as long as my parents continue to interfere in his life in this way, he will probably never make it. Update 3. First of all, Ivory and Tom have officially ended their relationship. And no, Tom didn't end it, just kidding. She was the one who ended the relationship. Let's just say it wasn't easy on my brother. Tom reacted in a completely uncontrolled way. He really didn't anticipate this outcome at all. He showed up at our apartment at 2 a.m, completely drunk, banging on the door and screaming as if he'd lost his mind. It was really scary. Elliot opened the door and Tom staggered in, immediately launching into an incoherent tirade about how I was to blame for everything that had happened. He claimed that if I had postponed my marriage, none of this would have happened. The level of irrationality in his reasoning is truly alarming. Elliot remained admirably calm throughout the episode. I couldn't be more grateful to have him by my side. And after trying to reason with Tom for what seemed like an eternity, she finally asked him for an Uber and made sure he got home safely. However, the whole situation left me deeply disturbed. I could hardly sleep that night. The next day, my parents called a family meeting. They said it was time to clear the air and determine how to proceed. Elliot and I agreed to attend, but I made it very clear that this would not be a discussion about our marriage. I informed them in advance that we were willing to talk, but only if they respected our boundaries. They reluctantly agreed, so we decided to attend. Tom didn't show up, which was no surprise. Apparently his hangover was too intense to bother turning up, so the meeting was limited to Elliot, me, and my parents. My mother started crying from the start, expressing how she felt she was losing not only Tom but now me too. My father tried to keep his composure, but eventually admitted that they were terrified that Tom would never manage to get his life in order. They even mentioned the fear that he might cause himself some harm. What really struck me was when my father commented that my personal success made Tom's difficulties seem even more obvious. Really? That is an incredibly distorted perspective of the situation. I told them directly that their constant overprotection of Tom is not helping anyone. It is causing him harm, and it has created an extremely toxic family dynamic for all of us. I pointed out how they have even compromised their financial stability to continue rescuing him from his own decisions. And all of this is not achieving any positive results. The more they insist on helping him, the more they are perpetuating this destructive dynamic. The meeting ended relatively positively, I guess. On the plus side, they finally acknowledged that asking me to postpone my wedding was a mistake. They even apologized for how they handled the whole situation and said they understood why Elliot and I decided to move forward without them. However, they clearly still feel hurt at having been excluded and are not completely prepared to accept our decision. The good news is that they agreed to stop overprotecting Tom, although I'll honestly believe it when I see it. They even suggested that he should start therapy. That seems like a step in the right direction, as long as they actually follow through. So that's the current situation. There has been some progress, even if it's just baby steps. The decision we've made with Elliot is to distance ourselves a little from my family for the time being. We've communicated this to my parents, and they seem to fully understand. That's progress if they manage to respect it. Only time will tell if my parents keep their word or not. We'll find out in a future update, when enough time has passed to assess whether they have really changed their behavior. Update 4. Tom has been harassing Ivory since their relationship ended. He has been calling her constantly, sending her messages through different social media accounts, and has even been sending her unsolicited gifts. He confessed that he was planning to propose to her and even showed her the ring he had bought to prove that he was serious. Ivory has rejected all his attempts to get closer and has repeatedly asked him to stop this behavior. My parents have been paying for therapy sessions for him, but he has only attended twice. And instead of insisting or finding some way to commit him to the treatment, they have declared that they can do nothing more for him. What a fine example of responsible parenting. They seem to want to wash their hands of the problem they themselves have helped to create. And as a result of their negligence, Ivory is suffering from my brother's inappropriate behavior. At first, my parents simply said that Tom would eventually forget about her and find another woman, which I find deeply disturbing because it's as if they expected Tom to simply get tired of harassing Ivory and look for another victim. That solves nothing and, in fact, has proven to be a completely wrong prediction. Not only has my brother shown no interest in anyone else, but he has intensified his obsessive behavior towards Ivory. This escalation has led to her being forced to apply for a restraining order against Tom. And my parents, with their infinite wisdom, have blamed Ivory for the situation. Yes, they tried to argue that this was going to hinder Tom's progress. Let me make something clear. There has been no progress, unless they are measuring progress in reverse and consider that regression is progress according to their criteria. Now Ivory is considering filing for a restraining order against my parents as well. At this point, I joke with her that I will probably be next. We have been keeping in touch because we have both been through similar situations with my family, and I can fully understand what she is experiencing. Not only has she filed a restraining order against Tom, but she has also made 2 police reports against him because some of the gifts he sent her contained disturbing messages. In one of them, which consisted simply of flowers, there was a note that said something like that he couldn't take no for an answer, and that he didn't want to live in a world where he couldn't be with her. This statement could be interpreted as a threat towards Ivory, or even as an insinuation that he might harm himself. The second gift was even stranger, a kind of pre-Columbian craftwork that is difficult to describe in words, but which, upon researching it on the internet, we discovered has connotations related to life and death. The accompanying message was also cryptic and could be interpreted in various disturbing ways. Ivory has filed the corresponding complaints, but the police have simply told her that they will investigate the case and that in the meantime she should take security measures. She thought that informing the authorities was the appropriate security measure, but apparently they are not as effective as they should be. I'm not sure what I can do to really help her. Offering her a place to stay with us, apart from the fact that she wouldn't be living alone, I don't think would solve the problem. In fact, it could potentially make the situation worse. I've tried to talk to my parents about it so that they can intervene with Tom, as I think they might listen to them. But they are taking the situation with alarming calm, as if it weren't as serious as it really is. Sometimes I think about sending them a craft with death symbolism to see if they then think it's something insignificant. Or better yet, to stealthily hang it in their room during the night so that, when they wake up, they will suffer the fright of their lives. That way we could laugh together, and I would tell them it's not that bad. Did you have a heart attack, Dad? It's nothing, come on, let's have a little laugh. I'm not sure how this will all end, but I fear it won't be in a positive way. Right now, my main concern is for Ivory's well-being. Update 5. We now know how far my brother Tom's uncontrolled behavior has gone, and at least Ivory has not had to suffer its most serious consequences. My parents have finally shown a modicum of sense, not too much, but enough to try to make Tom see reason. They suggested that perhaps it was time to leave his obsession with Ivory behind and concentrate on other things. This provoked a heated telephone argument that Tom took extremely badly. He decided to show up at my parents' house in the middle of the night. Although he did not hang up any ominous figure as I had imagined, in his drunken state, he had a violent confrontation with them and even threw a cup of coffee, which my mother had served him, directly at her. The incident only caused a minor cut on his arm and some minor burns, but it was still an extremely serious episode. My parents called the police, and for once, the officers did their duty to protect and serve. However, my parents have once again failed in their responsibility. What my brother really needs, in addition to intensive psychological therapy, more rigorous treatment sessions, or even more forceful interventions, is to face the legal consequences of his actions. But they have agreed to drop the charges on the condition that he be committed to a psychiatric facility. My concern with the solution is that these facilities don't tend to have very strict security measures. Could it work? Maybe, but there is a considerable risk that he could leave the treatment prematurely. Update 6. I was writing some of this as a reply to a comment when I decided it would be better to include it as a full update, if only for old time's sake. I have not heard from my family or myself for several years. I was replying to someone who asked about my brother's current situation. My answer is that he has been released from psychiatric hospitalization and has shown some signs of improvement. I cannot say exactly how much progress he has made, but the people who have interacted with him say that he seems to be functioning normally. I have completely cut off contact with my parents, as well as with my brother, as they agreed to take him into their home when he was discharged from the hospital. I clearly warned them that I would not have any relationship with them if they made that decision, and I am keeping my word. I am glad to hear that my brother apparently behaves like a normal person now, but let me keep my reservations. I prefer to keep my distance as a precaution, in case he displays problematic behavior again. I no longer worry about Ivory's safety, as she has met someone new, moved, and has marriage plans. Our relationship has cooled with distance, but we still keep in touch occasionally. She is aware of my brother's situation, and, although I can't say that she is completely at ease, the fact that she is far away provides her with some peace of mind. I hope that the person who made the comment can see this update. Otherwise, I will have to copy it as a direct reply.